Okay, I think we are live on Facebook and YouTube now. It's good to go. Good evening and Dharma greetings to all our venerable colleagues and to our devotees. Let us begin our bi-weekly sutra discussion by paying respect and homage to the Buddha. Let us recite Namo Tassa 3 times together. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. I pay my respect and homage to him, the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened Buddha. Dear Venerable Sirs, dear friends in Dhamma, it's a great joy to have our 62nd bi-weekly Sutta discussion. So last week we discussed Four Noble Truths, and this week we thought of having the discussion on the Noble Eightfold Path. And before we begin our discussion on the Noble Eightfold Path, I would like to introduce our venerable monks, and there are no nuns here today, to our audience. And last week, I contacted Bhikkhu Bodhi whether he would be free today to join our discussion, since Bhante Bodhi has authored books on Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. And Bhante Bodhi happily replied to me, said he would be joining us. So today is such a great joy to have us among us. Bhante Bodhi joined the discussion from New York. So we would like to give a warm welcome to Bhante Bodhi to our bi-weekly Sutra discussion. And then we also have Bhante Yogavaccha Rahula from Washington, D.C. And Bhante Rahula was going to have a meeting with his Brazilian friends today around this time. And he said he may not be able to join us. But to our good karma, that meeting got cancelled, so he is here to join the discussion. So we are very happy to have Bhante Yogavaccha Rahula from Washington, D.C. And then next we have Venerable Trudeau joining the discussion from Florida. And then next we have Venerable Muniputto joining the discussion from Hawaii. And then we have Venerable Shanta Sobana joining the discussion from Los Angeles. And we have Venerable Viveka Bhikkhu joining the discussion from Mississauga, Toronto. He's staying with us. Originally, he's from New Brunswick, Canada. Then we have Venerable Bhante Kusala joining the discussion from Boston. And then we have Bhante Jinananda joining the discussion from Ottawa, Canada. Then we have Venerable Somawangsha Thero joining the discussion from Vancouver, Canada. Then we have Venerable Bhante Jayasara joining the discussion from New Jersey. And then we have, I think you're from Long Island, Venerable, I forgot your name. You said Motorola, Moto G. What's your name, Venerable?
Sudhamananda.
Sudhamananda from Long Island. That I know. Welcome. So I would like to give you all a warm welcome to this bi-weekly Sutra discussion. I also would like to welcome our friends who are here on Zoom platform among us, among the bhikkhus. And also a warm welcome to our friends who are watching this discussion on Facebook and YouTube Live. And of course, we also have a bhikkhuni, Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh. I think Bhikkhuni, Venerable Bhikkhuni, can you have the video? Oh, now we can see you. She is of the Mahayana tradition, of Vietnamese Mahayana tradition, from Hamilton, Canada. So, Venerable Bhikkhuni, welcome to our discussion. As last 2 weeks ago, we had such an amazing discussion on the Four Noble Truths based on the Buddha's first sermon, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, and I received a lot of feedbacks from the lay people. They really enjoyed, but we did not have a detailed discussion of the Noble Eightfold Path. And so that led us to have another discussion of the same subject, Noble Eightfold Path. So I thought of our beloved Bhikkhu, the Bhante Bodhi, to see whether he would be free today. And to our good luck, he is free and he's here with us. And Bhante Bodhi actually suggested me, rather than talking about the Noble Eightfold Path in a traditional way, he asked me, he sent me 2 questions. I would like to read out these 2 questions, and maybe we can have open discussion about these 2 types of questions. And the first one,
maybe I can read the questions.
Yes, yeah, please, yeah, go ahead.
Then I don't have to answer them.
Well, let's see. Yes, Bhante, please read out.
I give everybody I present the problem.
I think what I hear from some monks, after reading these 2 questions, they started sweating. Maybe you can help us, Bhante.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so let me get close up to my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think everybody, of course, knows the sequence of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. So we start off with right view, then we come to right intention or right thought, then right speech, right bodily action, right livelihood. Then we have the 3 factors: right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And we see that the end of the Noble Eightfold Path is right concentration. And yet when we find other sequences, like we have the sequence of the threefold training, usually we have Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Sometimes it's presented as the training in Adi Sila, the higher ethical discipline, Adi Chitta, the training of the higher mind, Adi Panya, the training in the higher wisdom. So you could see we go from virtuous conduct to concentration to wisdom. But when you look at the sequence of the Noble Eightfold Path, it seems to culminate in Samma Samadhi, right concentration. So the question is, where does Panya enter the picture in relation to the Noble Eightfold Path? I know it's usually said any basic textbook on Buddhism, including, I think, my own little book on the Noble Eightfold Path, will say the 8 path factors are arranged. The first 2 factors, right view, right intention, that's the wisdom group. The middle 3 factors, right speech to right livelihood, the ethical factors, and the last 3 factors, right effort, mindfulness, concentration, are the concentration factors. Do you know which sutta the Buddha makes that threefold division of the Noble Eightfold Path, the 8 factors? Can anybody cite the sutta?
Bhikkhu Bodhi, I remember the Chula-Vedalla Sutta, there is a discussion between Dhammadinna and Visakha.
No, I'm saying, where does the Buddha make that distinction?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Well, in the Parinibbana Sutta, of course, he mentions, Sila, Samadhi, and Panya, the 3 trainings quite often.
Yeah, again and again. But where does he divide the 8 factors of the path into those 3 groups?
So,
Like
when
you ask any child in a what is he called? The Dhampasala, the Dhamma school in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
How do you treat the Noble Eightfold Path in terms of the 3 trainings? They'll tell you right off the bat. Right view, right intention, the wisdom group, that belongs to wisdom, right speech and so on, the Sila group, right effort and so on, the Samadhi group. But where does the Buddha make that distinction, that division? Nowhere.
Yeah, I don't remember that. And I know, Bhante Bodhi, you have translated most of the Pali Sutras into English. And have you come across any sutra where Buddha is talking about this division?
No.
Okay.
But I'm not saying that the division is not valid. It's just that we don't find it coming from the Buddha himself. The only sutta where that division is made is the Chula Vedala Sutta, which is spoken by the Bhikkhuni Dhammadina. Was it Dhammadina? Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, afterwards it said that conversation was reported to the Buddha, and then the Buddha said, "Sadhu, sadhu, well spoken by the Bhikkhuni Dhammadina. If you had asked me these questions, I would have answered it in the very same way." But Bhante, if she was so correct, why didn't you? You've spoken from the age of 35 to the age of 80. You've taught the Dhamma for 45 years, and no place did you make that distinction.
Could it be coming from the Atthakatha or Visuddhimagga, Bhante Bodhi?
Well, of course, the Atthakatha will pick. I mean, the distinction comes, or that division comes from the Chula Vedala Sutta.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the commentaries will, of course, pick it up, and other texts will pick up that way of dividing the 8 path factors. Anyway, so where does... It seems a bit strange that the Noble Eightfold Path culminates, ends in Samma Samadhi. So where does Panya enter the picture?
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, please.
Yes, Bhante Ram.
Again, I'm not a Pali expert like Bhikkhu Bodhi, Bhante Bodhi, but generally it's assumed that there's 3 levels of wisdom: Sutramaya Panya,
Yeah.
Chintamaya Panya,
Yeah.
and Bhavanamaya Panya. So the beginning of the Eightfold Path starts with that Sutramaya Panya. That means people initially heard about the Dhamma through hearing lectures or reading books, like most of us have. And then you start contemplating, you start thinking about it, you're reflecting, and you gain the Chintamaya Panya, a deeper level of wisdom that comes from your direct observation and so on. And while you're doing that, of course, you're also practicing meditation and gaining some degrees of mindfulness and concentration. And so by the time, and then following the Satipatthana Sutta that comes before right concentration, you're practicing mindfulness to the body, feelings, mind states, and Dhamma. Your concentration is continuing to increase.
Yeah.
Practicing those forms of meditation, and then finally you get to the Dhammanupassana, where you are then, especially the 7 factors of enlightenment, when you're developing the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, investigation, and joy, and finally that 6th factor of the enlightenment is concentration, which in my view would be it leads to one of the jhanas, if not the fourth jhana. And that's directly after that is when you attain Magga and Phala, which would be the Bhavanamaya Panya, which would be the deepest level of Bhavanamaya Panya. So, those things keep going back and forth. The first level of wisdom helps you develop some concentration and the insight, and that helps you go back, and your wisdom develops more, your practice of sila develops more, that helps your concentration to develop more, and it keeps going back and forth like that until finally they accumulate. And when those factors are balanced, the factors of enlightenment, when you gain that real Bhavanamaya Panya, which is the paths and path knowledge, and also the Eightfold Path. The Buddha mentioned two other factors: right knowledge and right liberation.
Yeah.
Right concentration brings us to the edge of the path, but then we have to kind of jump off the cliff, so to speak, to attain Nibbana by letting go of every trace of attachment and the ego. So, the right, the 9th and 10th factors of the Eightfold Path that are not ordinarily talked about, that is really where the right concentration leads up to that. And then that's really where the Bhavanamaya Panya culminates. When the jhana factors, you have that right concentration of the fourth jhana, at least, or first one of those three, it's debatable, but, and then combined with that wisdom, you attain the path. That's just what I wanted to
Okay. Does anybody else have anything?
Yeah, Bhante Kusala from Boston raised his hand.
I was just going to say what Bhante Rahul said at the end, the two other factors that we often discuss at the end of the Eightfold Path. I think that is also explained in the Pali quote that goes as Dasahangehi Samannagato Arahati Vuchatiti. So Dasanga includes these 8 and the last 2 factors, Samma Jnana and Samma Vimutti. So Panya is implied in there. And in Samma Samadhi alone, I believe that there is wisdom developed. And when we begin with right view, of abandoning misunderstanding and coming to right understanding, there is definitely wisdom factor in it. So Panya leads the way, and Panya seems to be very pivotal in realizing the Dhamma and being free from dukkha. So I was just going to bring those two up, and maybe Bhante Bodhi has another question related to this, that where does that come from, or something like that.
Yeah, now I see Venerable Sudhamananda from Long Island raised his hand. Venerable Sudhamananda.
Yes, thank you. Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, in your pamphlet on the Eightfold Noble Path, you identified 2 types of right view, the mundane right view and the supramundane right view, where one penetrates the Four Noble Truths in a direct realization and thereby attains wisdom. So it seems like there should be, after concentration, like the second type of right view, almost after you've concentrated and you've gone through concurrently the other steps of the Noble Eightfold Path, your view changes and deepens, and then you penetrate, and that's the supramundane right view, which is either wisdom itself or the direct precursor to the wisdom that we're seeking.
Yeah, there's a sutta, maybe I could bring in a couple of suttas that shed light on this question. Okay, one of them it's in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 117. It's called the Mahachatarisaka Sutta, the Great 40. And then the sutta speaks about, let's see how it begins. The Buddha says, I'll teach you noble right concentration with its supports and its requisites. Okay, and then what is noble right concentration with its supports and its requisites? So actually, it enumerates the requisites, that it's the factors from right view, right intention, up to right mindfulness. So those other 7 factors. Then he says, unification of mind accompanied by or equipped by these 7 factors is called the noble right concentration with its supports and its requisites. So it seems that when right concentration is mentioned as the last factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, we should not think that right concentration arises alone, but it's accompanied by these other 7 factors, and it includes right view. And then we have a definition of right view. First, the Buddha makes a distinction of 2 types of right view in the sutta. He speaks about the right view, which we call worldly or mundane right view, which is the understanding or acceptance of the principle of karma and its fruit. So that's not really directly relevant in the understanding of the Noble Eightfold Path, but that is more a sort of underlying presupposition for developing the Noble Eightfold Path itself. But then he speaks about right view that is noble, taintless, world transcending, a factor of the path. And then he mentions that this right view, he uses, where the text strings together a number of synonyms, including panya. So here he mentions panya, panyindriya, the faculty of wisdom, panya bala, the power of wisdom, and then the dhammavicaya bojjhanga, sambojjhanga, the investigation of phenomena, factor of enlightenment, and then the path factor of right view. So it seems that when one starts, as Venerable Yogavajra Rahula mentioned, when you start out on the Noble Eightfold Path, you start with, we call it conceptual or intellectual understanding of the basic principles of the teaching. But then when you develop the other path factors based on that conceptual understanding, then one reaches maybe first a mundane type of right concentration, but based on that mundane right concentration, it's a question whether it has to be jhana or not. I'm not so sure that I agree it has to be a jhana, but based on a certain degree of mundane right concentration, one develops insight, and then when that insight becomes strong enough, then actually that insight is already turning into a kind of panya. So we call this the wisdom of insight. And then when that wisdom of insight reaches the supramundane level, then it becomes the penetrative right view, the right view that directly penetrates the Four Noble Truths. That is what comes to be called the right view in the noble path, in the world transcending or supramundane path. Yeah, so that's one way to understand the position, how the right view that begins the path, that's the starting point of the path, matures through practice and then becomes the true panya, the real penetrative panya, the wisdom of insight and then the wisdom of the world transcending path. And then there's another interesting sutta. This is also in the Majjhima Nikaya. It's number 149, the discourse on the Great Sixfold Base, or the Great Discourse on the Sixfold Base, Mahasalayatanika Sutta. Okay, here the Buddha is speaking, actually this is about the practice of insight. So he's saying that when one knows and sees the I as it really is, when one knows and sees forms as they really are, when one sees eye consciousness, eye contact, and the feeling born of eye contact, seeing all of these as they really are, then one is not carried away by lust, by attachment to the eye forms and so on. And when one dwells in that way, let's see. Okay, then when one is dwelling in that way, he says, the view of a person such as that is right view. His intention is right intention. His right effort is right effort. His mindfulness is right mindfulness. His concentration is right concentration. But his bodily action, verbal action, and livelihood had already been purified earlier. So that way you have the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path now involved in the contemplation of the 6 sense faculties, their objects, the corresponding types of consciousness. So this would be the wisdom of insight. And so what I would say is that at that point, you have right view present, but not as just the conceptual right view with which one begins the path, but now it's the right view of insight. Okay, so maybe those are some texts that shed some light on the question, but maybe somebody else has some thoughts or can think of some passages, relevant passages.
So is there any venerable who would like to add more insights into what Bhante Bodhi said? Okay, nobody has anything to say. Okay, Venerable Shanta Sobana from Los Angeles.
Yeah, thank you very much, Venerable Sirs, and with the utmost respect towards the Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi and Venerable Bhante Rahula and Venerable Mr. Kamalasiri and also Venerable Sarnapala. And so when it comes to this Panya, so what I think we can't find it directly as information anywhere in the Tripitaka, because the Panya is a very the result of the practice. So here we go through the sutras and we go through details, so that all the details, it's kind of like we look something from outside world, but the Panya itself arises as an inside purification. So it is a result of this whole eightfold path. It's not something, one path that we can lead, okay, this is the way to the Panya. So as example, it like this. So if I bring this candle, so as thinking about the light, so somebody made the candle to bring the light, but itself the candle has no power to bring the light. Even the wax or the wicks or anything doesn't have ability to bring the light. So at the same time, this light itself can bring the light, but it's kind of like this whole part. It's when it comes to the eightfold path, this everything is connection towards the light, the Panya. So at the same time, even though if I keep this closer, and even if I write it in the wrong direction, if I keep the praying point or hitting each other, the light not going to come. So the light will come only in one way. If I apply this all together and keep it in the necessary connection, so in that way I can bring this light. There is no any other way. So like that, when it comes to that Eightfold Path, even the right view or the right effort or the right mindfulness itself cannot bring the panya, because the panya is not clear. It all panya depend on according to the very condition of our inside mind. So in the inside purification, it's not a kind of like a detail that we can gain. So what I think, and as Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi mentioned, that the Eightfold Path and lately I think this moderate only to practice point of view and clear the path, because as we know, when it comes to the Hindu tradition, there is according to the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, they introduce some kind of that 8 limbs of the yoga. So we see in the history there is a tradition, because when the Dhamma scattered, by the time what happened, only practice point of view they categorize and they develop some kind of a structure to build up and make the path clear. So now today we have that structure, but when it comes to the panya, and it's all depend according to the inside condition of our mind. So if we have ability to look into ourselves and purify ourselves with all this information, and at the same time with the right effort and the right mindfulness and with the right view, that we can bring the very result related to the panya. It's all depend according to
Come over here on this side real quick. I need a water.
I think that out of any discussion, we can't come to any understanding or any conclusion, and we can't gain any result about the panya, because it all going to become according to our mental formation. It depends according to our own understanding. And as example, all these Venerable Sirs, that if we ask separately, each one, what is the meaning of panya? They all going to give you some kind of different answer according to their own capacity of understanding by words and by mental formations. So that's why we can't come to kind of like a final solution to understand, okay, this is what panya, because it's the very purification of the mind, and without that purification we're not going to gain. So all this Eightfold Path, I think if we can come together and if we can put all together and practice, so by the time it will help us. Even it's going to depend person to person, and according to the person effect and at the same time according to his mental formations, the sanskara or the cankers. So it's depend person to person. So what I think, it's all together bring the panya, and at the same time it need our inner purification. So in the outside we will never see the panya.
Okay. So maybe Bhante Bodhi can comment on that later on. Let us hear, we have a few more hands raised. Venerable Viveka Bhikkhu from Toronto. What's in your mind?
Thank you, Bhante and Bhikkhu Bodhi. I was really happy to hear Venerable Bodhi bring up the Mahachattari Sakka Sutta, because it really gives that sort of mode of operation, how these factors of the Noble Eightfold Path work together. And I'm doing this movement with my hand, like a circular movement, because I believe in your question, Venerable Bodhi, it's sort of like a trick question, right? So there are many, perhaps many tricks in that question.
It's not a trick. I didn't intend to lay out a trap or to trick people, but just to bring up some challenging ideas for discussion.
Yeah, it's a good trick. I mean, in the sense that it triggers
a trigger rather than a trick. Yeah.
Yeah, right,
trigger
right.
for discussion. Yeah.
And
So because in one of these questions is that concentration is the end of that, why is it placed at the end of the Noble Eightfold Path? And then in that, it tells us that noble right concentration is with all the other 7 factors, right? And later on in that sutta, it also mentions right view working with right mindfulness and right effort. When these three circle around each other, and then whenever there's bodily action, speech, whatever it is, it becomes right speech and right bodily actions with this sort of generating force of this these 3. So he's just pointing out how these factors are interrelated. So I think that's just such a beautiful. I was just so happy you brought that up, and to see that it's not just a linear, sequence, that is actually working. It's like a mechanics turning together. So we can't leave out certain parts. So
and also I think that this point that's you brought up that sort of refers back to that Mahachattarīsika Sutta, in a way that sort of a bit contradicts that very neat elementary Dhamma school way of dividing up the 8 factors of the path into the 3 groups. These factors belong to the Sila group, to the concentration group, to the wisdom group, because underlying all of these factors, the sutta says, first you have right view. Right view is able to distinguish, even in the case of action, what is right speech, what is wrong speech, what is right action, what is wrong action, what is wrong livelihood, what is right livelihood. So you have right view there, which is a kind of elementary wisdom factor distinguishing, in the case of ethical action, what is wrong and what is right. And then even to implement the ethical actions or the ethical conduct, you need right effort and right mindfulness. So you don't have just effort and mindfulness in the concentration group, but you also have them functioning within the Sila group, in the Sila factors, or along with the Sila factors. And along with the wisdom factors, you have those 2 factors, right mindfulness and right effort, from the concentration group. So the factors are really sort of meshed together, integrated together. So it's a bit of an abstraction to divide them up into those 3 groups.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Ananda from Ottawa. What's in your mind?
I think you can hear me now, right, Bhante?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Bhante Bodhi, for forming these questions and letting us think about the very important Dhamma elements in the entire Tripitaka. Yes, I think when we talk about the Samadhi to begin with, as I remember in Chula-Vedala Sutta, Dhammadinna says very clearly that Samadhi, in order for us to practice it and bring the enlightenment into experience, we have to have 5 qualities to provide with it. So, for example, Silanuggahita, and practicing Sila is important for developing Samadhi, and then the Dhamma discussion, and also reading on Dhamma, then Samatha-Anuggāha and Vipassana. So when one provide these up to the point, that is the very development of Samadhi to be able to experience Nirvana. That is clearly mentioned in Chula-Vedala Sutta, as I remember. So the other thing is, Panya itself is a practice. According to Anguttara Nikaya, section number 1 and number Sutta, Panya Sutta, it says 8 conditions should be there for practicing Panya. There we don't see any sort of gradual things, but what we see from this sutta is really significant. Panya Sutta in Anguttara Nikaya, section number 8, Sutta number 2, it says very clearly that Panya could be developed when the practitioner get closer to the teacher and associate the teacher very much in the sense of knowing Dhamma, then that gives. And then to develop Panya, the second condition is you could ask questions from the teacher about certain experiences you get and even the difficulty you experience and so forth. So likewise, we can see, I'm not going to tell all these 8 conditions in Panya Sutta of the Anguttara Nikaya, but this kind of explanation shows us that Panya is also a practice. We can see that Sila practice, there are so many conditions mentioned in the entire Tripitaka. And for Samadhi, even Mahachattari Sutta itself is a whole method of practicing Sama, noble right concentration. And even Samadhi Parikkara Sutta in Anguttara Nikaya, it says, it's a very small discourse, all the 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path bring Samadhi. But we find little information like this here and there, that Panya is also a practice. So in order to practice Panya, perhaps we do not want to stick to those a very methodical way, but you have to stay with your teacher and ask questions, and then practice 4 types of training principles. In the Vinaya, then you have to actually practice Virya, and then there are such things. And at last, something interesting is says, you have to practice Udayattagamini Panya, see the rising and falling of all the aggregates. So that is the very direct way to practice Panya. So that I just want to point that Panya is also a practice. We have to have certain practices to develop Panya itself without mentioning anything else. So there are some discourses like that we can highlight when we think about practicing Panya. I think if you look at the Silavanta Sutta in Samyutta Nikaya, in the section where the Buddha talks about 5 aggregates of clinging, the discussion between Venerable Sariputta and Kottidas, I remember, they were talking about Yoniso Manasikara is the main quality we should have in order for someone who is morally wholesome to attain to Sotapanna. So he or she reflect the 5 aggregates of clinging, that is mean with Yoniso Manasikara in 11 ways, so that you attain to Sotapanna state. Then the one winner position should have Yoniso Manasikara on 5 aggregates of clinging in 11 ways. There you confirm yourself the next level of enlightenment. Like that, it goes on and on, so that from this discussion, I see that the baby level of Samadhi and Panya would be the Yoniso Manasikara.
Yeah.
So I think from this kind of explanation by the Buddha and also great disciples, we can see that Panya is a kind of development as well as it's a kind of practice. It's not only the end results of something, but it has to be practiced from the very beginning too. That's what I wanted to share about it.
Thank you, Bhante Jananda. Bhante Bodhi, do you have anything to comment on what he said?
Well, what I say is that what he said, I think, highlights an important point, which I think is a bit. It was said that in relation to what was said by Venerable Shanta Sobana, which seemed to indicate that there was no clear content to Panya. Whereas I think that there definitely is like a clear content to Panya, which is in this case, there is the contemplation of the 5 aggregates by way of those suttas mention 11 aspects, but those 11 aspects are really just finer divisions of the three universal characteristics of impermanence, dukkha, So there is a specific content that has to be taken as the theme or methodology of contemplation for Panya to arise. It's not just that Panya arises, without fixed content, but one has to contemplate by way of either the 5 aggregates or by way of the 6 sense bases, and then observing the particular objects that constitute the domain of contemplation, examining them first in order to get a clear discernment of their specific characteristics, and then contemplating them through the lens of the 3 universal or broad characteristics of impermanence, suffering, non-self. And it's interesting also that Sutta uses Yoniso Manasikara as sort of the subject of the thing that's to be practiced.
Bhikkhu Bodhi, can I ask direct questions from you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought these questions actually well before you mentioned in a different way, not with all the ingredients you added into the questions, but in a different way. So I think that for some people like Uggadittanya, the way they practice the Noble Eightfold Path would be starting with Panya, because they have done some homework, so that if they are in front of the Buddha or any teacher who are skillful, they need some instruction, not from the very beginning of the Noble Eightfold Path. They might catch up the necessary things to reflect from Panya section, so that they quickly get into the realization. But many individuals who have no clue about what it is need Sila, Samadhi and Panya. That categorization is really important for them. That's why the Buddha has 2 types of way to explain the Dhamma, from Anubhutikata, from the gradual explanations, and they go on making their mind ready for Four Noble Truth, and then the Four Noble Truth are being explained because their mind is vinivarana, their mind is away from hindrances. So that is for the people who have no homework about the Dhamma. But those who have that skill, basically Uggadittanya, maybe Vipaditanya, they are able to practice the Dhamma from Panya. Then directly they have taken some sort of samadhi with that, so that they realize. So I think
maybe some of the people here don't know the term Uggadittanya.
The quick learners, right?
Okay.
Yes, the quick learners, they have done homework, so that with one word or one phrase or maybe one stanza, they can reflect the Dhamma. So I think when we talk about Panya, we should not forget the Anupada. Panya has also some categorization. If you look at the Anupada Sutta, where Buddha talks about Venerable Sariputta, he talks about Mahapanya, the great wisdom, then joyous Panya. I cannot remember all Panyas the Buddha talks about. I think Tikka Panya. Then
Hasa Panya.
Putu Panya. Javana Panya, yes. So when we take this categorization of Panya, I think some individuals has developed some sort of Panya than the other one, so that they quickly get into the necessary conditions to move forward from here to next level. So that I think in broader sense, I think Panya is such so that some individuals can get into the Panya section directly because of the homework. So that the way we learn theoretically the Noble Eightfold Path would be Sila, Samadhi and Panya, even though it is not mentioned in the discourse.
Yeah. Certainly true,
Yeah, when we come to practice, it's different. It shows again in the Sile Patitta and Arosa Panyo, Chittang Panyan Chabhavi, and that stanza in that very small sutta in Chata Sutta. So the one who is wise, taking the Sila into practice. The one who doesn't have any wisdom cannot practice Sila either.
Yeah.
right? So that the practicing sila is being done by somebody with some sort of knowledge or wisdom, whatever it is, any word, but it's called sapanyo, the one who has wisdom.
Yeah.
So I think when we learn the Dhamma, particularly Noble Eightfold Path, we have a particular way to do that. But when we come to real practice, it happens in a different way. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, okay. So thank you. We have more hands raised. Before that, I would like to introduce more venerables who are here. It's Bhante Nanda from Long Island. He's here. And Bhikkhuni Dhammadina from Virginia. And Venerable Mystica Kamalasiri Thero from Minnesota. And Venerable Pemaratana, Bhante Pemaratana from Pittsburgh, United States. And we have Venerable Bhante Konnaya. Bhante Konnaya, I would like you to turn on your video. I haven't seen it for a long time. From New York City, and Bhante Gururatana. I don't know where he's from, so welcome. Next, I see Venerable Bhikkhuni Thich Tin Quang from Hamilton, Canada, raised hand. Bhikkhuni, what's in your mind?
Is this Bhante Gunaratna from the Bhavana Society?
I think so.
There's only one.
Oh, Bhante Ji. Maybe.
Maybe he's trying to remain anonymous.
The most venerable Bhante Hedapula Gururatana Nayaka Mahatera. Maybe he will show up at the end of this session to add more insights. Venerable Bhikkhuni Thich Tin Quang from Hamilton.
Hi, Venerable Sarnapala and Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, and to all the other venerables, thank you. I'm just, first of all, I just want to say, which is probably not a big surprise, I'm not a Pali scholar by any stretch. I know more Sanskrit than I do Pali. It's important to understand, at least from my perspective or from the way I understand things, that the Eightfold Path is not a series of progressive steps to be mastered one after the other. And each step is to be developed and practiced together with the other steps because they all support one another. And I think this was mentioned before, it's like they're interrelated. So strictly speaking, there's no first step and there's no last step. The 8 steps, however, do support the ethical, the sila and samadhi and prajna, and as they're essential factors in the Buddhist training. With right view, as they're usually presented in a list, right view is the first step, even though there is no first step, and it supports wisdom. However, you need all of the steps for the wisdom to eventually come out. Wisdom is not something that it's in all of the steps, and they have to come together in order for wisdom to awaken, or for people to gain some insight through their experience. And when we talk, at least in my tradition, I come more from a Zen tradition than anything. It's not merely an intellectual understanding of the steps. It's a thorough penetration. We're seeing things in their true nature, and we see them without a name or a label to them. It's our happiness and the happiness of those around us depend on the degree of right perception or right view. And so we have to touch reality deeply, knowing what's going on inside and outside of ourselves. And that's the only way we can liberate ourselves from suffering. And it's caused by, if we can't do that, then we have wrong perception. And because I have also a background as a psychotherapist, I also see it in how people misunderstand what's going on around them, and it causes them great suffering because they don't have right view of what's going on. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents worth in and hope that I stayed a little bit on topic for the rest of you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bhikkhuni. Is there anything that you would like to comment on, Bhante Bodhi?
No, I don't have anything to comment on it.
Okay. And so, okay, I see Bhante Venerable Sundamananda raised hand.
Yes, when we're talking about concentration kind of being the end of the Eightfold Noble Path, at least in the writing, and I started thinking about 2 things that I had read. One of them was in the discourses on the numbers and the tens, and the first one in the tens is the prophet, where Venerable Ananda asked the Buddha, what is the object, what is the profit of good conduct? And he talks about sila, saying freedom from remorse. And then he goes through all of these factors, goes past concentration, which leads to seeing things as they really are. Guess anicca, dukkha, and anatta. And then that leads to disenchantment and fading of interest, which then leads to nibbana. And he says at the end, so you see, Ananda, good conduct leads gradually to the summit. And I thought that was really interesting because it kind of includes both some of the path factors, but also the 7 factors of enlightenment, or some of them, as well as sila. And then that reminded me of something that you wrote, Bhikkhu Bodhi, Venerable, about the transcendental dependent origination, and how those factors are kind of mixed with psychological factors and maybe some path factors as well as sila. And I think perhaps when we look at them a little bit, we can also get some insight into the Noble Eightfold Path in terms of how it materializes in our practice.
Bhante Bodhi, do you have anything to comment on that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to refresh my memory. Yeah, but actually the sort of sequence that we find in a number of suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya, yeah, we could map it on, certainly you could map it on Samadhi Panya, since we have the initial stages by observing the silas, one has non-remorse. Then you have these factors, joy, this is pamoja, going to piti, rapture or elation. Then I think passaddhi is tranquility. Yeah, so those are factors that you find in the 7, amongst the 7 bojjhangas, piti and the joy, delight and tranquility. Then it comes to sukha, to happiness or pleasure. Then samadhi. So there you have samadhi, but not at the end, but in the middle position. Then based on samadhi, you have yatha bhuta jnana dassana, the knowledge and insight into things as they actually are. So now we're coming to the real higher wisdom. And the word used here, yatha bhuta jnana dassana, dassana is seeing, which entails, it's pretty much the same as samadhi. So now you're getting into the right view of insight. And then out of that right view of insight, then comes the steps leading to nibbana realization, disenchantment, dispassion, liberation, and the knowledge and vision of liberation. So there with the liberation and knowledge and vision of liberation, then you're coming to those 2 factors that lie in the tenfold scheme, where you have right knowledge and right liberation after right concentration. So the relationship of all of these different groups of factors can become very complex. Maybe it shows the sort of versatility of the Buddha as a teacher, that he didn't sort of stick to one rigid scheme, but was able to present the factors of the path in different combinations and in different sequences, maybe to suit the capacities of different disciples.
Okay, we see Venerable Trudell from Florida. What's in mind?
Salutations to all the venerable, most venerable, and bhikkhunis present today. Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, do I have this right? I am super junior monk. So, someone have here a slideshow that shows morality as putting beliefs into action. And under meditation, they put training mind to have correct thoughts and beliefs. And under wisdom, they put linking thoughts and action. Is that correct?
It doesn't seem like what you call classical or canonical or traditional definitions, but maybe you could see the connection of those ideas with the three terms, but it's not the explanations that one finds in the canonical texts.
Okay.
But you don't have to be, one doesn't have to be confined just to parroting the words that come in the text, but you could see how they could apply maybe in a more, that could be maybe call it a practical way, particularly concerned maybe with everyday practice rather than the sort of higher dimensions of realization.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm this because I think the lay people are confused when we're on an academic scholarly discussion and they're like, how do we make this connection in sequential order? And everyone's scratching their head and wisdom seems so far reached. So I think by putting it into this context, people clearly see, for example, when I teach this to super junior people, that they always ask me, well, why is it so hard to meditate? I find it difficult to meditate. And I said, well, number one, you got to cut out the drama in your life, which is the sila, because everyone's got drama in their life, especially the Gen Zoomers nowadays, the Gen Millennials too, like me. And one can't meditate if there's dramas in one's life. And then, of course, working on the meditative part, which I hope we get to today, because today's was broken into sections about the 4 foundations of mindfulness also under concentration. And so I'm just waiting for that to unfold. But thank you for clarifying for all of us. I'd like to yield the floor back.
Thank you. Next, I see Venerable Vivek Bhikkhu raised his hand. What's your next?
Thank you so much, Bhante. I just wanted to point out that and honor Bhante G's contribution in the chat box. And I'm just wondering if it would be worth even reading out.
Okay. Okay, so the eight factors conducive to the development of liberating wisdom are as follows. Tutelage, that is living in dependence of a dharma teacher. Number 2, inquiry, that is questioning the teacher about the dharma. Number 3, bodily and mental aloneness, that is cultivating the stilling of both the body and the mind. Number 4, moral virtue, that is keeping to the monastic discipline to the fullest. Number 5, deep learning, that is mastering the dharma in their import and practice. Number 6, industry, that is effort in overcoming unwholesome states and cultivating wholesome ones. Number 7, speaking the dharma, that is either discussing dharma or meditation. Number 8, watching rise and fall, that is fully understanding the nature of 5 aggregates and contemplating their rise and fall. Okay, so these are 8 factors of the panya. That's how you cultivate, isn't it? Bhante Dinananda.
Yes, Bhante, thank you. The same thing I was actually talking about, and I thought of putting it in the chatting box for anyone to read for any further discussion. So the question I just want to ask from this very scholarly and also very wonderful from Bhikkhu Bodhi and Bhikkhu Rahula and everyone. So when we come to the Noble Eightfold Path, in Pali we call Samma Ditti Samma. In each factor we have Samma, and when we come to English translation, it's right. Basically, that is the thing I see from many translation. Does this translation provide the very meaning of Samma, or is there particular way we need to understand Samma in Pali? And is there any other terms that we can use for Samma in English? I could see that late Punnaji used harmonious instead of right in his writing. And number of monks I see recently talking about different way of understanding what exactly Samma means or right means. If right is okay, because we are coming from where English is not spoken as main language, and we should ask this question from you, Bhante, who understand things in English, so that what is exactly we can explain in the word Samma or right. If there is any alternative, what it would be.
Bhante Bodhi.
You're asking me.
Yeah. I think he asked the question from his Bhante.
When I began learning Buddhism, I came across the rendering of Samma as right, and I've used it myself. I don't know a better alternative. I came across years ago Venerable Punnaji's rendering as harmonious. It didn't seem very convincing to me.
Okay.
When you're practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness, is that harmonious mindfulness? And then it's contrasted, Samma is contrasted with Micca. It has Micca Ditti, he says that there's no benefit in giving, no result of good and bad deeds. Is that non-harmonious view? Or is it a wrong view? It seems to me, from the Buddhist perspective, it's a wrong view. The problem is not that it leads to lack of harmony, but it doesn't accord with reality. In fact, the Buddha uses almost as a synonym, at least in regard to contemplation, Samma, he uses Yatha Bhuta in accordance with reality, in accordance with the actual nature of things. I know now among certain groups in America who are sort of rebelling against traditional ethical standards, so they feel uncomfortable with the ideas of right and wrong. But it seems to me that right and wrong are quite foundational to any kind of system of ethics, and certainly to the Buddha's path.
I see Bhante Yoga Rahula raising hands. Bhante Rahula.
Thank you. The reason why I raised my real hand is because I can't figure out on my computer how to put that yellow hand up. I was trying for some time. But, ever since I started learning the Dhamma, of course, the right view and was always, used as a translation. I always understood that as being whatever the Buddha called right view, right speech, right action, that whatever is right leads to more happiness and less suffering. And what is wrong leads to more confusion and more suffering. I mean, that's the way I've understood and kind of, used the term when, and all those, right concentration, right effort, and so on. So that's just one point of view, one way of seeing it. But I had one other thing I wanted to mention is about the right concentration. Now we all know how the Buddha defined right concentration in the Eightfold Path. That means attaining the first jhana, the second jhana, the third jhana, and the fourth jhana. And at the end of the fourth jhana, then when the mind is purified without any wavering, then the meditator bends their mind toward the destruction of the taints, of the defilements. And basically that's attaining and attains nibbana, the enlightenment. So, it's in that definition of it very clearly that, all the other steps of the Eightfold Path are helping to train the body and the mind to gain the right type of conditions that are eventually, then when the mind is able to attain those levels of insight, because it affords all the five hindrances have been suppressed, and the mind becomes, sort of a purest condition. That's when they attain those, the right knowledge and the right liberation, as we've already mentioned. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out about that. And the Buddha repeats that at least hundreds of times, because every sutta he talks about explaining the Eightfold Path, he explains the right concentration as those four jhanas.
Okay. Well, I forgot to acknowledge Bhante Nandaloka from Montreal, Canada. Bhante Nanda. So I see Venerable Shanta Sobala raising hand. What's in your mind?
Yeah, thank you, Venerable. And so what I want to mention here that so we give these details about how to gain the wisdom of the Panya. So this all, I think it's all informations. This all information relative. So as example, stay close to the teacher and having discussion with the teacher. So then there is a question come, what kind of teacher? Because according to the condition of the teacher, that whatever the conversation going to become different. And at the same time, when it comes to the student, in what kind of condition or what kind of viewpoint that the student hold regarding the wisdom, or what the by wisdom. So then that's why these all informations, but somehow finally it is very important for all of us to keep open mind and get out of the self-centered or the egocentric mind and have the faith. So that is why it's very important to develop the faith towards the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha, because that becomes the very foundation for the journey. So somehow when it comes to the very meaning of the Pali, this Bhante Ji asked that the Samma. So in the Pali it calls Samma, and in the Sanskrit it called Samyak. And this all, it's rather than when the Western world, because in the Western world, in the Western philosophy, more based with the outside world. And so they used to categorize things according to comparing things. But when it comes to the East, the very samma or the samyak mean is a skillful path towards the liberation or the enlightenment. So it's a skillful path. So when it comes to the English language, rather than the adjective or the nouns, there is an adverb. So the very adverb it's called it's kind of like in the straight or direct. So right, it's kind of like, as example, direct path or the straight practice. So it's a kind of like sometimes when it comes to English, maybe they explain this right word, as example, right view. It's kind of like a direct view. It's kind of like a straight view towards the liberation. So in English, most of the time we see that people, it's about, talk about comparing to right and wrong. But as we all know that when it comes to the very liberation, we have to liberate from our own point of view. When it comes to point of view, this when it comes to that kind of liberation, there is no right or wrong. So we all have to accept things as it is. Not only that, when it comes to things, when we come to understand things as it is according to the very tranquility meditation and the vipassana level, it's about recognizing and understanding how things come to be as they are. So when it comes to that kind of experience, we all detach from categorizing or kind of like holding a point to gain a kind of like a develop a view and just become the experience. So that's why in Sati, so there is no right or wrong. It's all just the moment of experience. So I think when it comes to the samma, it's if we take the meaning like a skillful path, it will give us a more clear understanding regarding the practice. Because when it comes to skillful path means how much you develop your skillful abilities to practice, not about the outside conditions.
Okay, I think we have spent a lot of time on the first question. We completely forgot to discuss about the second question Bhante Bodhi asked. But I would like to briefly talk about it. Maybe the question is, Bhante Bodhi, do you want me to read it out?
You could read it, Johan.
The second question she suggested was regarding the Four Noble Truths. It is said foundations of mindfulness are the basis for concentration. Right mindfulness is explained as the four foundations of mindfulness, and right concentration is defined as the four jhanas. Yet, the system of the Satipatthana Sutta, which elaborates on the four foundations of mindfulness, makes no mention of jhanas. Some monks have said that to practice Satipatthana correctly, one must first master the jhanas. Does this seem like a reasonable position? Okay, we see Bhante Kusala from Boston. Raised hand immediately. What's in your mind?
No, what I thought, Bhante, is that Samahitan Chittanti Pajanati includes jhanas, that when the mind is concentrated, you know that the mind is concentrated. And it's in there that we have Mahaggata Chitta, Amahaggata Chitta, various ways that the mind, the Chitta experiences it's whatever it is experiencing. And when they have vanished,
my charger.
like
Black
when Sankitang Chittang, I think I forget the Pali now, that when the mind is contracted, that it has hindrances, and when the mind is free from hindrances, that means someone is in the samadhi. So in that samadhi state, one of the four jhanas must be in there. That was my first thought about this second question that Bhante Bodhi has asked.
And Bhante Yoga Rahula, do you have anything to add? We can't hear you, but you had to unmute yourself.
Yes, I could
Yes, Bhante.
add that you can gain concentration while practicing mindfulness. And because you're practicing mindfulness of the body, first of all, you start out maybe with mindfulness of breathing, right? So with mindfulness of breathing, we all know we can attain access concentration, even the first jhana, and goes on to contemplate the body, the feelings, the mind states. And as I mentioned before at the beginning, that when you come to the factors of enlightenment, then probably, at least you've gained the first jhana by the time you've been practicing the Satipatthana, or even more. And then at the end, you could, go up to even the fourth jhana, as I already mentioned, with the right concentration. So the sixth factor of the enlightenment factors is right concentration, and the seventh one is equanimity. And the hallmark of equanimity is the third and the jhana is where equanimity is the strongest. So you can see from that gradation that it's that equanimity that after that, Sankara Upekkha is when one would attain Magga. So that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Bhante, did you raise your hand?
Yes, since nobody is talking, I take this opportunity. When it comes to this, both this question is relevant, and because we don't see the very word samadhi is talking in the Satipatthana itself, but if you look at the 5 results of practicing Satipatthana, can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So, Sattanang Visuddhya, the purification of beings, and surmounting sorrow and lamentation, pain and grief, then Nyaya Sadhikamaya, attaining knowledge, and final one is Nibbana Satchika. So all these 5 results could happen when one practices Satipatthana. So when I look at deeply on these Sattanang Visuddhya, purification of being, and the other 2, they do not happen to someone if Samadhi doesn't arise with Satipatthana. So as Bhante Yogavach Rahula said, I think it is implied, and when Sattanang Visuddhya, it's in Visuddhi 7 purification of mind, like what you call Sapta Visuddhi, Chitta Visuddhi, Sila Visuddhi. With Chitta Visuddhi, we talks about the purification of mind, which means taking all the hindrances out from our mind. So it could happen as the first results of practicing Satipatthana. So I think as Satipatthana is also, completing both Samatha and Vipassana, according to my experience, it's Yuganatha practice. So that Samadhi, though it is not mentioned by that very name, very title, it is always there in each Kayanupassana, Vedananupassana, and Chittanupassana and Dhammanupassana. So I think it is implied. Otherwise, according to Anapanasati Sutta, when you practice Anapanasati, it leads to completion of Satipatthana. Then from Satipatthana to 7 factors of enlightenment, then 2 factors, then Nirvana. So I think that is what I think about the presence of Samadhi in Satipatthana.
Yeah, Venerable Shanta Sobana from Los Angeles.
Thank you, Venerable. And actually, when it comes to the Buddhist meditation practice, so one of the important things we have to remember, if any teacher, it doesn't matter how famous and how educated, if any teacher come with the idea, must have this, I think that is a wrong view, because when it comes to it depends according to the person and according to that person practice and according to his understanding. Each and every person can attain to liberation in different ways. Sometimes one that as example, Venerable Swarnakar, that Buddha gave that kind of like a mental object to observe in a different way, and Venerable Angulimala attained to the liberation in different way, and at the same time Patachara attained to the liberation in different ways. So in that way, we can see each and every person attain to the liberation in different ways. So if anybody come with the idea, or you must have attained, first you have to come to jhana and then you have to attain to the liberation or the enlightenment, I think that is a kind of like we putting the teachings to kind of like a very hierarchy, and it's kind of like it's only we based with the information point of view argument. So what I want to mention, that according to the Buddha's teaching and the way that how the Dharma went through the history and deeply according to the especially the very early Buddhism, when it come to that era, that whoever came to Buddha had the very clear open conversation and understood, and so in that way, after they understood something, they changed their behavior. They practice in different ways. So that openness. So especially as Venerable Bhante Yogavachara Rahula mentioned from the beginning, Shrutame Jnana, Chintame Jnana, and Bhavaname Jnana. The Shrutame Jnana, this open mind, that having, it's in the another way we call the Parato Gosa, that listening to others, the ability to accept and having the clarity inside our mind take us to some kind of liberation. And at the same time, if what I want to mention here, if anyone come, that's my argument is this: if any teacher come with, oh, you must have that, I think he never understood what is the Buddha's teaching. Thank you.
Very interesting. Now the final reflection, Bhante Bodhi, you have heard what some venerables talked about your second question. Now, as final reflection, Bhante Bodhi, what's in your mind? We would like to wind this up with that reflection.
Yeah, it seems to me that there are different approaches that suit different people. And for example, one finds like in the scheme of the sequential training that occurs in a number of suttas, like in the Digha Nikaya, the first book of the Digha Nikaya, and then in the Majjhima Nikaya, several suttas where you have the clear training first in the silas, then a number of intermediate steps. Then you have the abandoning of the 5 hindrances, the 4 jhanas, and then the 3 vichas or higher knowledges. So there you have the jhanas explicitly, clearly, definitely mentioned as a factor or as a part of the path. But in the Satipatthana Sutta, one doesn't find explicit mention of the jhanas, though of course it's possible to rise through the practice of Satipatthana. But it seems to me that the Satipatthana provides maybe an alternative to that sequential training, in which the emphasis is on the direct development of insight through contemplation of the different experience, factors of experience, bodily, feelings, states of mind, and dhammas. And so I don't think that there's sort of a fixed and definite way, but different practitioners will differ according to their dominant faculty, their disposition of mind. So those who put a stronger emphasis on samatha and samadhi will move through jhanas, whereas those who have a stronger inclination towards direct insight can move through the Satipatthana system without the attainment of jhanas. And so we find in contemporary times, for example, Mahasi Soyador and U Pandita Soyador and the teachers in that lineage put a lot of emphasis on the practice of the Satipatthana system, yet they don't put any emphasis on the attainment of jhana.
Sadhu, amazing. We had such an amazing, very productive, meaningful discussion. Very grateful to Bhante Bodhi for suggesting these questions. Wherever Viveka, you have something?
Yes, I just want to clarify, this is maybe a wrong concentration and wrong view, all mixed up together. I mentioned Bhante G had posted something in the chat box, but it was actually Bhante J. So a small difference can make a big difference in the end. I just wanted to correct that.
Thank you. And in fact, Bhante Kapalasiri from Minnesota is here, but he remained very quiet, did not say anything. But next time, Bhante Kapalasiri, you have to speak up. And also Bhante quiet, Venerable Bhikkhuni Dhamma.
Because the Bhikkhu Bodhi was there, then there is nothing to say.
Yeah, I'm already.
Okay, so I have a very kind request from all of you, and also those who are watching on Facebook and YouTube Live. Please share this program in your social media timeline for those who are really interested in Dhamma. And this is the gift of Dhamma, Dhammadana. And with this in mind, now we would like to recite the Ovada Patimokkha verses. Can I kindly request Bhante Nanda to recite the Ovada Patimokkha verses? Bhante Nanda.
With respect from the monks and friends, I'm going to recite Ovada Patimokkha right now. Thank you. Sabba papassa akaranam kusalassa upasampada sacitta pariyodapanam etang buddhan sasanam Kanti paramang tapoti dikha Nibbanang paramang vadanti buddha Nahi pabbajito parupghati Samano hoti parang vihetayang to anupavado anupagato patimokkhe ca samvaro mattanyuta ca pattasmin Pantanca sayanasanang adhicitte ca ayoko etang buddhana sasanang
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante Nanda, for beautifully reciting the Ovada Patimokkha verses. It was really relaxing. Thank you so much. And I'm very grateful to all of you. And thank you, Bhante Bodhi, for suggesting these two great questions. It was very intriguing and tricky questions, I think, that made all the monks to think deeply. So thank you so much. And also Bhante Rahula, you present. I know you were supposed to be in Brazil to have a Zoom meeting with your Brazilian friends, but that got cancelled. You came here, and all our venerable monks and nuns who are here today. It was such an amazing, very productive discussion we had, and this gave us more insights, and it actually kind of forced us to think. Maybe that was a spiritual reinforcement. Though we have read sutras, knew this, and to think in this way it helps us gain more wisdom. And so I'm very grateful to all of you for coming together for this 60-second bi-weekly sutra discussion. And this was such a meditation practice, a meritorious deed we performed together.